our special guest, because it's 11 o'clock on Wednesday, is Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA, and you're an awesome BCBA because you have great experience with autism, and on top of that, you take into consideration what the parents have going on. So I always appreciate that. And I'm always thrilled to have you here, but it seems like the running theme lately has been reinforcement, that this is where, as parents, we begin to understand, okay, this is how I'm going to teach my child, and it makes sense to us, okay, in order for any behavior to be maintained, I've got to reinforce it. But then when it actually comes to reinforcing, there seems to be a little bit of a disconnect for us in the beginning. So tell us, define reinforcement for us, because I think that's a little confusing for us too. So let's start there. What is reinforcement?
So reinforcement is when the consequence that you provide immediately after behavior results in that behavior either maintaining or increasing in the future, so it's more likely to happen in the future. That's what reinforcement means. If the behavior isn't increasing or it's not maintaining, then reinforcement hasn't occurred. So a reinforcer is basically something that you're providing contingent, so dependent on the behavior happening, that then means that the behavior is more likely to happen in the future.
Okay, so it's one of those confusing things that you can't actually know if it was reinforcing until afterwards.
Exactly. So you really, technically, when we're talking about reinforcers, we should be talking about potential reinforcers.
Okay.
Because they're potentially going to result in that behavior, whatever it is you're trying to work on, being more likely to happen in the future. But you don't know if it's actually functioned as a reinforcer till afterwards, and you see what happens with the behavior.
And I think this is where some of the confusion comes in, because I want it to be black and white. I just want you to explain it to me and go, this is what will maintain this behavior. And I want my child to behave in that way. And there's nothing black and white about this. But what's good about it is that it cuts us a little bit of slack, so that we say, okay, I'm going to see if this is reinforcing. And if it is, I'm going to make note of that, but it may not be.
I mean, obviously, you can have things that are where you're kind of, this is very likely to be a reinforcer, because we all have things which we're very motivated for.
Right.
And so there'll be things which you kind of have a very, very 80% chance that they probably are a reinforcer, but technically you just don't know for sure.
Yeah.
And it can depend on a lot of things. Like something could act as a reinforcer for certain behaviors, but not for others. For example, like dependent on the effort, I might be, a piece of cake might motivate me to do one small thing, but it's not going to motivate me to run a marathon necessarily. So there's lots of different kind of factors that can then come in. And equally, like if you're asking your child to do something that's very, very difficult, what's going to reinforce that behavior might be different from if you're asking them to do something that's very easy for them.
Yeah, and when our kids are older and when our kids are on the high functioning end and they're very verbal, we can have discussions with them about what would be reinforcing enough for this. But for the little ones, or for kids who aren't verbal, or kids who are more profoundly affected, there's the added frustration of, well, how these are the kids that I really want to be able to help, and how can I figure that out? So how do we figure out what the likely reinforcer is going to be?
Well, I think there's a number of things that you can do. First of all, observing your child just on a daily basis. And most parents, obviously you're going to be observing your child a lot, and you're going to notice the things that he gravitates towards. You're probably going to have a good idea of the types of things he tends to seek out.
Right.
Or the things that he tends to drag you across the kitchen for. Like you're going to know, and then that gives you an indication, well, he tends to gravitate towards things with Thomas on, or he tends to gravitate towards the things that make noise or lights or whatever it is, or books or things like that. So it's likely that those things might work as reinforcers. You can also do a sort of preference assessment where you choose a few things you think might work, and you put them out in front of your kid and see which one that they gravitate towards. And they just kind of will reach for it or look at it or indicate in some non-vocal way that they're interested in it. And then you can kind of do process of elimination. So if you put out 4 things and the kid kind of gravitates towards one, or maybe gravitates towards 1 or 2, then you remove the ones that he just seems not interested with, and then you can put those 2 things back out and see if he has a preference for one over the other.
And you could even potentially mix in other things as well.
Absolutely. And then, of course, there's just trying it out. I think that's often the best way, especially if you're stuck and you're kind of, I know he likes these two things, but he doesn't seem to like anything else. I don't know what else he likes. And this is something that all therapists should be doing. And like if I go out to a kid's home and I'm doing an initial like assessment or meeting and I don't know the child at all.
Right.
So I tend to just go with, I know that, you know, through experience of working with kids, you kind of generate a bank of things that you know a lot of kids like. Equally, a lot of kids really hate those things too, but you just start pulling stuff out of the bag and just having a go and seeing whether the kid likes it. And the other thing to remember is sometimes kids, and ourselves as well, like we don't like things immediately.
Right.
New things are not always reinforcing.
Right.
Sometimes like you might need to try it and kind of keep initiating whatever it is or getting your child to engage in it a few times before they suddenly start going, oh, actually, this is really fun. Because sometimes, you know, yourself, I know for me anyway, when I'm starting doing something new, my initial reaction is like, oh, I don't know what that is, or I don't
know what the rules are.
I'm not interested in that. It's like, or it's a wee bit stressful because I don't know what it is. But after a while, you get used to it. And you know, like a good piece of music, the more you kind of listen to it, the more you're like, oh, that's great.
Yeah.
So sometimes you just have to, it's about trying things out. Just, you know, try new things. Don't be afraid to try new things. And maybe, I mean, obviously if your kid really reacts like, you know, 'cause some kids, like, for example, really hate when you blow up a balloon and you let it go and it flies all around, and they really, really don't like that. They're really frightened by that, but then other kids love it. If your kid has a really bad, like a fear reaction or something, then clearly that's not going to work. But if they're just kind of indifferent about it, maybe you want to try it a few more times and see if they get interested in it.
Yeah, you know, I'm thinking too, at some time we should make a list of all those kind of intro things that therapists do, like the balloon, because it doesn't occur to some people.
I made some lists of things that can be potential reinforcers, because it is very hard when you go to a home and as a therapist, and therapists tend to get stuck in a rut and you just can't think, you know, we're on the spot and you just can't think of something to try or something to do. And so we did me and some colleagues did put together some lists to give therapists and parents as well, and be like, you know, try this or try that, or think about this or think about that, because it can be hard just off the top of your head to think of things, because don't forget that, well, you know, we're adults, so we don't necessarily think of things as being rewards that our kids find rewarding. And I find a lot, like, it's not the big flashy crazy things that kids really are excited about. And I mean, sometimes they are excited about those things, but it's the really simple, silly little things, like really cheap, simple things, like those little pop up, you know, they're like a little piece of rubber and you turn them inside out and you put them on the table and then they like pop up.
And there's a delay that it has to rework itself and
like really, and those are really cheap, like things like that, or like those little, I find kids really like those little wooden toys. I used to get them for Christmas as a child. I don't know if they make them anymore, but there's like a little base and then you have like a little animal on top, and when you press it, the base in, the animal like flops over and then you release it and they pop up again. And those things are very cheap, very simple, not flashy at all, and kids really like them. And I think you were saying and you were saying, Shannon, I think one time about Jem really liking something very simple that didn't even occur to you, and I can't remember what it was now. And
there's so many things. Yeah. We covered, we should pull it up again, but at Christmas time, during the holidays, we covered, there was a blogger, a dad, who wrote about the top 5 toys of all time, and like number 1 was a stick, and number 2 was dirt, and number 3 was cardboard. It was those kinds of things, and string, I think, was one of them. A lot of those things, in all fairness, are things that have to be monitored because there's the potential for harm, but they're toys that allow for great creativity. But Jem loved a cardboard box, would do all kinds of things with a cardboard box, and somebody got him for one of his birthday, like about 4 or 5 people got together, and there was a whole system of these tubes that had magnets, and you could attach cloth to him so he could build anything from a pirate ship to a tower. And he had a lot of fun with that for, I mean, like probably 2-3 weeks, a really good time. And then he went back to doing cardboard boxes. It was a very expensive toy. But he loved to build a fort with cardboard boxes and paint with them and turn it into a robot and use his creativity. So it's kind of amazing what kids, and that wouldn't have occurred to me.
No, and I've had kids who really really love things like being rolled up in a duvet, and then
Yes.
that's a requesting opportunity too. So you can get them to be like, roll me, or roll, and then you roll them a little bit, and then a little bit more, and a little bit more, and they just love that, and it's like so simple.
Yeah.
Just being, but you wouldn't necessarily think about that. Being
Yeah.
like, maybe he'll really like being rolled up in a rug.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So you just have to try things out, and you know, kids, for some reason, some kids really like, I don't get it because I think it feels really weird, but they like the jelly arms, you know. You grab someone's arms and you do that with your arms, and I think it feels horrible, but some kids really like that. So it's just, you just have to try these things. And maybe we can give you the list, because it probably is very useful, actually.
In fact, can we make sure that we have that next week, and we'll go through it next week? That'll be great. That'll be our promise to you, that next week at this time we'll have that list for you, and we'll discuss it on the show. We should take a break, but when we come back, we're going to talk more about reinforcement and how we deliver reinforcement with Evelyn Gould. So stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. And our wonderful guest, because it's Wednesday, we're in the 10 o'clock hour on Wednesday. Our guest is Evelyn Gould. She's a BCBA. And I always love when you're here talking to us, because you say things in a way that's very practical, that we can understand. And you have a lovely Irish lilt to the way you say it that just makes it that much more interesting. We had a question during the break. And the question is, would footwork/brain training workout routines help with development? And yes, I don't know what that means.
No, well, I think what that person's talking about is some kind of workout routine that's designed to activate different parts of the brain, and it's probably like coordination, footwork, movement type things, like where you're supposed to be training different parts of your brain. I think that's what it is, but I'm not entirely sure. And as it's hard for me, I can't really say whether it would help with development. I'm not sure if you're talking about development overall, or brain development, or motor development, or whatever it is, and I can't really comment on that, because I don't know anything about research.
Okay.
On that particular the brain training workout. But I mean, from just what I'm thinking, I don't think it's not going to do any harm. I can't see that it would do any harm, and it's likely that it may help with motor development in terms of increasing coordination and balance and muscle tone and so on. So from that point of view, I could see it working. In terms of other areas of development, I'm not sure at all. So
if there's research, we're not aware of it, and so hard to say. But interesting, and would love to know more about that. But we were talking before the break about reinforcement, how you deliver reinforcement, how you know what's reinforcing, and you gave us some great tips of some things, and you're going to bring in us a list next week of some things that to try with kids to see if they're reinforcing, which I love. But I think that some of our confusion as parents, it comes with when we go to deliver the reinforcement and how we do it. And I watch therapists do it, and they're so nuanced in the way that they do it. I still am not that good at it. But let's say that we're doing DTT, the discrete trial teaching, and we're doing 10 trials of something. And so that we've done the preference assessment, and we kind of know what we think might be a good reinforcer for this particular activity. And the child does something, and we have to prompt them to do it. Are we reinforcing when we prompt them to do something?
Okay, so first of all, just, you know, being skilled at delivering reinforcement is hard.
Okay, so it's not just me, it's not just the people who are writing in, it's difficult.
Absolutely, and it's something that you have to learn. You know, you have to train yourself to do it, and some people are just really good at it naturally. They seem really natural at it, and some people, some therapists, it doesn't come naturally, and it takes a bit of training. And because I think generally as human beings, reinforcement doesn't come naturally.
Yes,
it's just not the way that we're programmed, and also because our kids don't learn in the same way necessarily as we do. We have to kind of use reinforcement differently from how we would. So Shannon, if I ask you to do something and you do a good job, and I'll send you an email going, Shannon, you're amazing, I love working with you, that's really reinforcing for you, and that's just me telling you. But for our kids, us just going, that's great job, or whatever, really good, they might, you know, that may not act as a reinforcer for them. So we have to work a lot harder at it. obviously our goal is that eventually we will be able to just say to our kids, well done, that was great, and that will act as a reinforcer.
Right.
Or that they will start to find some things intrinsically motivating, so that they'll start kind of doing things because it makes them feel good.
Right.
And that's our ultimate goal. But initially, we probably are going to have to work towards that. And so we have to start off working a lot harder. So it's kind of exhausting, I think. Like, I remember just working with kids and just dripping with sweat because I'd be bouncing off the walls and like running around and throwing them up in the air and doing all sorts of very energetic reinforcement.
Yes. I was talking about when Peter Farrick started at our house. And Peter can be very loud, and we were in a condo, is sandwiched in between. We were like the middle condo, so there were people on top and on the side, and a lot of them worked during the day, thank goodness, because I would always say we're going to get kicked out, because Peter would be in the living room with my son and be like, yeah, good job, and throwing him, and my son would be squealing with delight, and I would go, they must think that we are having a rave in my living room.
Yeah.
But it was working, and we weren't being kicked out, so I said, well, we're going to let this go. But very interesting to me. I also have to say, Evelyn, that I think, especially when we've been in a place as a parent, and it's taken us a little while to get to ABA, and our child has been engaging in a lot of challenging behaviors, it was difficult for my husband and I in the beginning just to do the praise.
Yeah, it's very, that's totally right. It can be very difficult going from that situation to just forcing yourself to give even praise. It feels very unnatural, and you know, also I totally understand sometimes if you're thinking like, why should I be praising my kid for doing this one tiny thing which they should be doing anyway?
Right.
You know, that kind of thinking, or it just feels really fake as well. Like if you're not used to yelling and screaming and jumping around and being like, woo, like it just you can feel ridiculous.
Yes.
And you feel silly, and it just feels fake.
It feels foreign. It feels foreign. But I will say that the more you do it, the more it feels right and the more enjoyable it gets. And I think it's a really good thing for us to get in the habit of praising all the time and going woohoo and celebrating and being because that feels good after a period of time.
Well, you start getting reinforced for doing
Yes,
it.
exactly.
So it makes the giving the reinforcement becomes reinforcing for you.
Yes. Absolutely. Okay, so getting back to what you're saying, it's difficult and you have to...
So it's difficult on so many levels. So you've got like the fact that it's just difficult because it doesn't come naturally to any of us. We're much more about noticing things that are wrong than we are about noticing things that are right, and that goes for all human beings. And it can feel weird when you start doing it. And so, and then it's also, what on earth do I use? So that's hard, learning like, well, what types of things can I try? And then of course there's like, well, okay, now I've figured out something to try and I'm getting over the weirdness of it, but when am I supposed to do it? How do I do it? Like, what's all this stuff about differential reinforcement and do this and don't do that and correction and la 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 la. Like, it's very overwhelming. It's hard, and it's a learning process, and the therapists have to learn it as well. Like, they don't come like Peter. Like, they have to learn how to be that. But again, people like Peter are clearly also naturally, it comes more natural to them.
Yeah, exuberant.
And it can change from kid to kid. You know, some kids, you know, you just click with, and it's very easy. For me, I'll be like, oh great, they're this kind of kid who likes all the boisterous stuff and all this kind of thing. And then I might go work with another kid and we're like not quite clicking, and I'm trying to figure them out and they're trying to figure me out, and it takes a wee bit longer for us to get into the kind of comfortable rhythm of reinforcement, so to speak.
And sometimes they're different. I talk all the time about the fact that everybody else could be loud and boisterous and screaming and going woohoo with my son, and he found that very reinforcing. But if I'm loud, even now, he's like,
doesn't like it.
Doesn't like that at all.
So it's really, really specific, and just remember that reinforcement is so specific to the child or the person. It's specific to where you are and what you're working on and everything like that. So that's why it's important to make sure that you assess what to do.
Okay, so going back to my original question, you're doing 10 trials, and on the first one you're prompting. But the child does it with the prompting. If, let's say it's a full physical prompt that you're having to, how much do you give a little bit of reinforcement? Do you give the praise for that or nothing?
Well, it depends. I know you're going to hate me because I'm just going to keep saying it.
No, that's good for me to know, because sometimes I go, well, in this instance I think I should, and in this instance I think I shouldn't. So if it depends, that's good.
It does depend, because if this is a skill that you've never worked on with your child before ever, and it's the first time that you're doing it with them, then if they do it correctly with the physical prompt, then you may give like, you know, a few seconds of their big reinforcer, if it's arm wiggling or whatever it is. And then as you go along and you start fading your prompts out, then you're going to maybe switch to just praise for the prompted responses. And then, you know, so, but again, if you were saying to me that this is something that we've been working on, or we've done, and they just didn't do very good in the last sitting, so now we've reintroduced the prompt, then maybe you're not going to give like the full hoo-ha, a dancing dog and pony show, but you're still going to give like a decent amount of reinforcement, because you're maybe correcting them and you do want them to be correct. So it really does depend.
Okay, so common sense and remembering what the goal is. I'm guessing, you know, the goal is we want to make sure that it gets taught.
I think some basic general rules to work from to start with is that if you're teaching something brand new that your kid doesn't know, you're going to want to provide them with more reinforcement. So something that's really much more reinforcing to them, you're going to give them something more than just praise.
Right.
But if it's something that your kid has mastered and it's fairly easy for them, then you probably don't need to provide such a high level of reinforcement. You're going to want to start moving towards just the praise.
Right. But if that's not working for some reason, then it's not reinforcing enough.
You're going to up the reinforcement, exactly. Like or you need to change your reinforcers.
Right.
So if you're finding that you're not able to fade the prompts out, and your kid's not learning and the behaviour's not increasing, then you need to maybe think about, check your reinforcers and see if there's a problem there.
Okay.
But there's so many other things as well that could be going on. Like sometimes it depends on the context that you're teaching in and how your child is feeling that day. Like if your child is having problems with attending because you've got builders like drilling in the next room, you may have to keep their attention by increasing your reinforcement.
Right.
Or if maybe your child's just not as motivated that day, maybe he's had a hard day at school or whatever it is, maybe you need to increase the reinforcement. It really, really does depend, and it depends what you're teaching, where you're teaching, what's going on at that time. You're going to have to be flexible about it. Okay,
so it is a little bit of a dicey thing. It's a big gray area. We got to use our common sense, give ourselves a break, and say, you know, I'm going to try it this way and see what works, and if this doesn't work, then I'm going to tweak it another way.
Yeah, because if you become too rigid about it, you end up with problems. You know, I see that a lot, say, with something like a token system.
Yeah.
You want to be careful about not fading your tokens too quickly. Like sometimes what happens is families, when once they get the behaviour up to like a level that they really are happy with, the token system starts to get forgotten.
Right.
Sometimes it gets left behind. Maybe they forget to bring it, or it sometimes therapists give tokens, sometimes they don't. They forget, and then you run into the danger of the behaviour decreasing because you haven't faded slowly enough to keep it maintaining. You know, and it's very easy to do. But it's like if it's working, don't stop doing it.
Right.
Got to figure a way to like fade back.
Right.
Have a plan in place. Does that make sense?
It does, because it's human nature, I think, for us that if we've been working on something and then it gets taken care of, we move on to the next thing, and we like cold turkey leave that thing, and then we usually will have to come back and clean that up. So
yeah, I mean, we do it in our personal lives too, where we just expect people to just start. You know, that they do something, and we're like, yay, thanks so much, and then we just expect them to keep doing it without having built into having reinforced the habit of it, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
We just assume, and then we just start noticing whenever they don't do it, and then we're like, why did they not do it? But we haven't built in a reinforcement schedule for it. Does that make sense?
That totally makes sense. We had some further clarification on the Footwork brain training that they said easier to explain would be something similar to Dance Revolution. Do you know what Dance Revolution?
I don't know what Dance Revolution is.
It started out in video arcades as a big machine, and now they have them on video game systems. That it's
it's a thing where you're supposed to follow a pattern and imitate.
Yes, and like they'll show you arrows, and you step with the left foot, step with the right. So there's a visual component to it that you have to match up timing with a visual with the feet. So I think, you know, it's very similar to what you had said before, that I don't think that anybody has done any studies yet on Dance Revolution to see what it does to the brain, although that would be an interesting study.
Yeah.
But certainly can build...
It's likely to build your ability to do that kind of a task. So it's going to build your fluency at being able to maybe imitate, follow follow direction kind of thing and be and coordinate your body. Just like if I start going to dance classes and I'm trying to do choreography, I'm completely useless at it to start with, and I'm like, oh, they're going left and I'm going right, and then eventually you get better at it. So I can see that it definitely, provided your kid has the skills to be able to do that, and it's probably going to increase muscle tone and that kind of thing. But as for what it does for other other areas of development, I really don't know.
Yeah, I don't think anybody has done any studies on that, but a really good question, and maybe somebody will. You know, lots of people are asking right now of parents, and one of them in particular is the Autism Research Group is asking, what would you like studies to be done on? So if that's something that you'd like a study to be done on, you can go to their website, Autism Research Group, and say, hey, I'd like to know whether this has an impact.
I mean, they're certainly doing research in other populations of stuff like that, like with older age people, to see what helps keep your brain kind of ticking over. But with regards to the developing brain, I don't know of any studies. But that doesn't mean there aren't any. I'm not aware of it.
Right. I think we would heard about it on the news, though, if there was something about Dance Revolution. I think it'd be on the box. Yeah. They'd be talking about it, going, and not this, this develops brain. So very likely nobody has done that, but it's a very interesting comment.
Question.
Yeah, it is a very interesting concept. I think there is a social element, though, to the Dance Revolution for the kids. Because sometimes you do it with somebody standing next to them that they have different moves than you do, and self-esteem, and so it could be very.
You can get your peers to come over, but if you have it, I don't know. If they think it's fun, it could be useful.
Yeah, and people do it in arcades and things too. So.
And again, like if your kid enjoys it and you're able to get them doing it well, then that's something that they have, a skill that they can bring to their peers, and it's like a good friendship building, getting positive attention for your child.
And if they like it, if it's reinforcing, you can use that as a reward for all kinds of things.
Absolutely.
Very cool. All right, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to continue to talk about reinforcement, so stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we're having such a good time here with Evelyn Gould. We're talking about reinforcement and how we deliver reinforcement, and what I'm discovering from this discussion is that it's just not a black and white thing, which is good for me, because in my head I keep thinking, how do I get this into a black and white thing, and it just isn't, and that's a really good thing for me.
I mean, there's general rules, like the closer the closer that you deliver the reward or whatever to the behavior, the more likely it is to reinforce that behavior, or the stronger the reinforcement effect. The longer you leave it before you provide that reinforcer, the weaker the effect is going to be. And in fact, you might end up reinforcing something else by mistake that happens between the behavior and the reinforcer. I mean, so there's some rules.
Yes, there's some things that are black and white. So let's go over that one again. The most likely success is when the reinforcement is delivered in close proximity to whatever the behavior was.
To increase.
Okay.
Yeah.
So for us as parents, we want to make it as immediate as possible. However, there are times when we can't, and that's when we want to bring in token economy.
Yeah, exactly. That's where token economies are very effective, because they kind of bridge the gap between the behavior happening and the delivery of the reward. And the thing is that tokens have to be paired. So that's another thing we should talk about. So how does something become reinforcing? Well, basically, something becomes reinforcing because it's paired with something else that's already reinforcing.
Yeah.
So when you're teaching your kid to use tokens, you're going to have to. It's no good just giving them a token and expecting them to be happy,
right?
Because they're going to be like, what's this? Unless, of course, they find the tokens intrinsically reinforcing. Some kids do. Some kids, especially if you put like something on it that they really like, some kids actually even find the tokens. Or if you give them like a penny. I've had kids who are like really enthusiastic about money, and they love that you just give them a penny and they put it in the jar, and then when they get the jar full, then they get something else. And that so tokens don't have to be like little pieces of paper or stickers. It can be something else. But what you want to do is give the child the token and then immediately have them exchange the token for something they really like.
Right.
So that way you're saying this equals this, kind of like money. It's like, you give me this, I give you this, thing that you really want.
So in the beginning, if you're starting this at home and you're having control of all the circumstances, in the very beginning you give them one token and they could turn it in right then.
Yes, they immediately need to exchange it for what they really want.
Right.
And you're going to do that a few times until the kid until your kid knows, they get it, and they're immediately, you give them the token, they're like,
yeah,
where's my toy?
Yeah, exactly.
And once they've got it, then you can start increasing the number of tokens they have to get before they can exchange it.
Okay.
And build up. And that way, your kid's learning how it works.
Yeah. And I have said before that, you know, back in the dark ages, 6 years ago, when we started working on token economy with my son, and the therapists would make these like really cool tokens that had all the, you know, Star Wars or Legos or whatever he was into that week, they had on it. But now, and I brought it up before, I have my phone sitting here, they have free apps for your phones. It's crazy. And what I do now is, if we're going to do something with a token economy, I'd hand it to my son because he understands how to run the app better than I do. And you can customize it, so that you can change what the tokens are. You can write on it, I'm working for this. He can put a picture on it of the thing that he's working for. And you can set how many tokens you have to get. It's that crazy easy.
And again, it's important to remember that you don't have to have crazy fancy token system, like beautifully made and everything. It's how you implement it that really matters.
Absolutely.
I mean, yes, like I said, you might get tokens that the kid really likes, and that might be an added kind of bit of reinforcement for them. But ultimately, it's how you use the token system that really matters. So, for example, like we just said, making sure that when the kid does the thing that you want them to do, you immediately give them the token, and you don't, wait till you get back to the car and into the house and then give them the token, because that's not going to be very effective at all. Exactly, it's very muddy. You don't, the kid, you could be reinforcing anything there or nothing at all. So it's very important that you give it right away.
There are all kinds of these free apps, though. This particular one that I use is called EasyKid Tokens. It's free. And literally, I give, the last time we did it, I'm working for a haunted house party. He typed that in himself.
I don't know if you can show
and
that.
It's got a picture. I don't know if you guys can see. And he's got his little tokens down here that he decided he wanted happy face ones. But for, if you've got a smaller child, you could make this yourself. But it was very reinforcing to him to get to program in what that he wanted. And he had to get 6 of them.
And it's great because you don't have to worry about forgetting your token board. And carting stuff around and like losing tokens. And I remember lots of trips of like having tokens in a pocket, and you're trying to carry a token board and tokens and manage the child, and it's all very cumbersome and annoying.
Yeah, and we'll probably show in a few minutes.
I'm really excited about that.
Yes, it's wonderful. We'll probably show in a few minutes that I made one for his school year that's all with Velcro, and and I love that kind of craft project.
Some of us don't.
I know, not everybody does. But what would happen when he was younger is that the therapist would make one for me, and they would give it to me to have in my purse, but then the Velcro would be stuck to something else in my purse, and it has those kinds of problems. But yeah, free apps, and then when they're old enough, they can program it themselves, which talk about, you don't even have to do the preference assessment. I said to him, what do you want to work for? And he's in there typing and putting the picture. I don't even know how to put the picture in, but he knows how to do it. Whatever. But it can be a really, it's a great way of being able to deliver a form of reinforcement. It's delayed gratification.
Exactly.
So fabulous.
And again, like we just said, there's no hard and fast rules about how many tokens and what the tokens are valued at. That really does depend on your child, what you're working on, what they want to earn, and how long you've been working on the skill, and like where you are, and like maybe if you're in a very challenging situation, you're going to want the kid to be able to earn what they need in a shorter period of time, because it's going to be hard for them to wait, then harder for them to wait than if they're in a more relaxed setting, and so on. So you really need to be flexible and kind of figure out what you need to do to motivate your kid or to kind of make it work.
We had a response that somebody wrote in, because I was saying to the last question that groups like the Autism Research Group are asking right now, what would you like research? So they want to know if we have the link to the Autism Research Group. And Emily, is that something that we could, she's so far ahead of me. autismresearchgroup.org. Right now there's a survey that you can take on their website that asks you a bunch of questions, and in particular, what would you be interested in? We always have Dr. Jonathan Tarbox on Fridays at 11 o'clock. I shouldn't say always. He can't always be here on Fridays, but he will be here this Friday as far as I know. And he was saying that the main thing that the Autism Research Group, the main filter that they put things through is, would if we're, whatever study we're doing, is this something that a mom would find interesting, and that a mom could use the information that we're going to glean, which I think is great.
Yep, and the sad thing is that actually there's not that many people funding research and doing research that is that kind of research. Most of the money goes to, figuring out genetic factors to do with autism, or biological factors and so on. And so it's really wonderful that they're doing that, because we need more people doing actual real life treatment, who can answer the question, so what? I find myself reading a lot of articles where I get to the end of it and think, so what?
Yeah.
How is that helpful to me now? How is that going to help my parents right now?
Right.
And the sad thing is it's not.
Right.
So it's really wonderful that they will really want to push doing some research that really can help people right now.
And I believe when people ask us what we want, we should tell them. And so they're asking, what would you like research done on? And they're going to listen. So write to them and tell them you want what you want. I think that's wonderful. Okay, we're going to take another break, but then when we come back, we're going to come back and talk about differential reinforcement. Okay. All right, stick with us. Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here with our special guest, Evelyn Gould. We've kept her much longer than we said we were going to, but I said we were going to talk about differential reinforcement, but we only have a couple of minutes because it's almost time for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. But tell us what differential reinforcement is, and then we'll talk more about it next week.
Well, very simply, it's just providing different levels of reinforcement for different things. So you're distinguishing between certain behaviors for your child. So for example, like when your child first takes a step, everyone's like clapping and like, woo, that's amazing. But you're not going to provide that same level of reinforcement every single time that your child walks a step from there on in. Eventually you're just like, you walked a step, so what? Very good. It'll go down to being like, oh, that was a great job. And then, maybe they're walking and you're like, that's a great job. And then they do something else, like pick something up and you're like, yeah, woo, that's amazing. So what you're doing is basically doing that with your kids, where you're when they do something new or whatever, you're going to provide one level of reinforcement. But when they do something that they've been doing for a long time, you're not going to provide the same level of reinforcement. That's all it really means.
Okay. So something to be mindful of. We already do it in our real lives, but we're going to apply that to these very set circumstances with our kids now.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you, as always, and we'll look forward to next week. You bring that list of things that are potential reinforcers. So stay tuned for next week for that.